to another episode of First Down by CoachTools. Today I'm here with Coach Kurt Hines. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Absolutely, Justin. I appreciate you having me on.
Coach Hines is the head football coach at Coronado High School, which is in San Diego, California. So, to kick things off, Coach, can you just share with the audience a little bit about your background and how you've ultimately gotten involved in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is I just wrapped up my 26th year of coaching high school football. I love absolutely everything about it. Uh, a very long story that I'll make really short was I've always been passionate about football from second grade through college, but never thought about coaching until a college professor back in New Hampshire asked if for any volunteers to help out with a flag football team of special needs student athletes, if you will. And I jumped at the chance, and I was on the field the first practice throwing a football to a young woman, maybe sixth grade, who has Down syndrome, and she dropped it time and time and time again. And when she finally caught it, her eyes just lit up, and it was like she had just won, caught a pass from Tom Brady in the Super Bowl type thing. And that was the first time it kind of clicked for me. I was like, man, I want to do that. Like, I want to be able to coach and make an impact like that. And the rest is just been an amazing journey. I started out as reaching out to a local high school back in New Hampshire after that experience, and just not even looking for a paid position, but just to volunteer, just kind of get my foot in the door somewhere. And it just so happened they were looking for a head freshman coach. So I learned a lot, messed up a lot, and just kind of grew along the way. And was at Sauhegan High School for 7 years. Left there, went to Goffstown where my wife and I lived and raised our family. And after 2 weeks at that new school, I told my wife I'm done. I said I'm going to honor my commitment and finish the year. But the guy I was coaching with, just we didn't see eye to eye. And I'm not talking about philosophy of X's and O's, but just how to treat people. So I honored my commitment and finished the year. But my wife said, "Hey, apply to be a head coach at Bedford High School. It's a brand new school. They're looking for a head coach." And I said, "Joe, I've been a freshman coach for 7 years and a varsity assistant for a few weeks. Don't know if I'm qualified, but sure enough, I applied for it, got the job, and took our beatings. My first year as head coach, we had no seniors yet, but we got our teeth kicked in every week. Like, we got punched in the face day in and day out. And fast forward, my last 4 years there, we went to the state championship 3 out of the 4 years. Had
Wow.
144 young men in the program, which for New Hampshire is really big, um, and loved everything about it. And it wasn't what I created; it was what we collectively, as coaches and players and community supporting us, created. And then our oldest daughter, we have 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. Our oldest daughter, who came out to school at San Diego State, had gotten married and called one day and said, "Hey, I'm pregnant." And my heart just leapt. I was like, dang, I'm going to be a grandfather. And then I was like, oh, suck, we're moving. Because I knew we didn't want to be grandparents on the other side of the country.
Right.
Skype and things like this are phenomenal when you're talking to strangers or friends that not family. So we packed up and sold everything and moved across country 9 years ago. And as you mentioned, I'm currently the head coach at Coronado. I was an assistant at a different school for 2 years. Felt the call to be a head coach again. So just wrapped up my 7th year as head coach at Coronado, and it's history, if you will, in the making. But just blessed to love what I do.
Awesome. Well, having 20 plus years of experience both on the East and West Coasts and all at various different roles and organizations, what advice would you give maybe a coach who's just getting started off in the role?
Great question. I think to start is forget about everything you learn in high school or college as a player. Being a coach is completely different. And what I mean by forget about that, obviously the skills you learn and the knowledge you have is very important. And you've got to hold on to that and take that with you. However, depending on where you land as a coach, that head coach and the coaching staff may have a completely different philosophy of what you experienced as a player. Um, and I think that's an important part of the process when looking for a school. Do your own research. Kind of interview the coaches that you are going to apply for, because there's a lot of great football programs throughout the country with varying degrees of success, and a lot of them do things differently. So find a school that matches your desire as a coach. Not everyone cares about relationships with young men and young women. Not everyone cares about building character. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people say sports build character. Like, no, no, they don't. Sports on their own don't build character.
Right.
Um, Coaches, when they are intentionally coaching and modeling and teaching character, build character. So find a program that kind of fits your desire to lead, and then from there, be yourself. I think not enough of us of coaches give the young men and young women we coach credit. They see through the BS. They see through the nonsense. And if you're trying to act or put on some facade, you're not being true to yourself, but also those young men and young women will see right through that, and they're going to have a lot less respect for you. So be true to yourself and be who you want to be as a coach, not who you think Bill Belichick is or Nick Saban or whoever. Just be yourself,
Yeah.
and then be
And
willing to learn.
definitely, definitely. So I've had an opportunity to speak with a lot of different coaches, and your name has actually come up in some of those conversations just about focusing on more than just the X's and O's and culture of football. So you are definitely a prominent coach, especially in the social media world. So can you talk about a little bit more about the importance of culture, and then obviously focusing on the integrity and character of kids as you are coaching them?
Yeah, it's funny. Before I dive into that, we had a game about 4 or 5 years ago. We beat the snot out of this one team, and then fast forward a year later, we graduated a bunch of kids, and they sorry, I hate to admit our cats are running around. I'd love to say our pit bulls or our Rottweilers are running around. We got 2 cats that are causing havoc. Um, but anyways, fast forward after we beat this team pretty good. And there were no issues. There was no tension with the coaching staff. Great coach, and he and I are not. We don't go out and grab dinner together, but we're friends, if you will. And fast forward a year later, we went to their place. We threw 5 picks, and they ended up beating us. So I went across the field after the teams. Our guys are getting ready to hit the bus, and I wanted to go congratulate the head coach one more time and just say, "Hey, phenomenal job," because he really does a good job. And he goes, "Oh, coach, you've got to meet my wife. She's a huge fan of your stuff on social media." And I was like, "Man, maybe I need to get off social media and start focusing on coaching a little bit more than all this craziness." And he's like, "No, it's important what you do." Um, so I appreciate you asking that. I am, and I do want to share. I am an expert, and I mean this sincerely, in absolutely nothing. I'm passionate about everything, but I'm an expert in nothing. So when my name is brought up in certain conversations, I don't claim to be something I'm not. I've been so blessed, as you, I'm sure, to meet some amazing coaches throughout the country who I'm just taking notes from left and right. I'm like, man, they do a lot of things right, and I got to switch this or I got to change that. Um, but I think for me, the relationships are what it's all about. Truthfully, if we're in coaching, and I don't care what sport or what level, elementary, middle school, high school, college, professional. If you're in it just to win games, actually, let me take that back. Maybe professional or college is a little bit different. But if you're in it just to win games, um, it's a long road, and you're probably not going to stay in it long enough. If you're in it to win games, and at the same time, we always talk about Coronado building champions on and off the field. Um, and if you want to make it an impact in people's lives, you have to get to know them. You have to take time and invest time in getting to know your players. And for me, that all comes down to the off season. I love the football season, but during the off season is when you have more time in the weight room, working side by side with the young men and training with them to really make an impact in their lives. So I think when you think about culture, for me, the first word that always comes to mind is relationships, because that's we don't need to overcomplicate things. The more you know your players, you know what makes them tick, you know why they come out for football, you know a little bit about their home life or maybe a lot. Um, we're going to be better equipped to serve them, and that's what coaching is all about. It's about service.
Definitely. And this actually reminds me of a conversation I had with another coach. His name's Mike Rickey. He was the third, I think he was at Garnet Valley High School outside of Philadelphia for about 38 years. And he always talks about these 3 pillars that he's had within his program. And those were, I believe, selflessness, character, and hard work. And in his office all around the school, he had this triangle that he set up, and he really just focused on the culture of his program. And like you were saying, creating relationships and actually making a point to talk to players. And from what it seems like, and just our conversation now, it seems like you've experienced a lot of success in that respect. So
Yeah.
any and anything else that you think would be important for a younger coach to know about, you know, maybe some like specific examples of how they can improve the way that they create relationships with kids and other coaches.
Yeah, I think be humble enough to go do your homework. Go out, one of the first things I did when I was a head coach back in New Hampshire was I reached out to 3 local high schools in the state that were perennial powerhouses, and just reached out to the head coach and introduced myself, said, "I'm the new head coach at Bedford High School. Would you be willing to have me buy you a cup of coffee or lunch or whatever, and just sit down and talk to them?" And you can learn a lot about, uh, all 3 coaches. I won't mention the programs, but all 3 coaches I reached out to said yes. 2 were phenomenal, and 1 was just just an arrogant son of a gun who just really wanted to hear himself talk. But you learn those things as well. And I think from there, uh, know your why as a coach. One of the biggest mistakes I made, my first few years as a head coach, was I knew my why. I knew why I wanted to be a head coach, and a very short answer for that is I want to have the power to surround myself with like-minded people, not yes men. I want to be challenged. I want coaches to say, "Hey, listen, not sure if that scheme you're running is correct. I don't know why we're doing this in the weight room, or what are the thoughts on that." But like-minded in the aspect of, yes, we want it and we need to be passionate about the game of football, the X's and the O's, the off-season training, but I want to be surrounded by people who love people. Because if you love people and you want to pour into people, and not just the studs, it's easy as a coach to fall in that trap of saying, "Oh, I'm buddy buddy with all these starters." Yeah, well, what about the redheaded stepchild? What about the fat little kid, or the skinny little kid, or the 400-pound kid that can't, tie his own cleats? Um, I want to surround myself with people who love people and are going to use football to elevate those people. And I think too many coaches do that the other way around. They want to use people to elevate themselves in football and pad their own stats or resume so they can just keep going on to the next biggest and best thing. And there's a pitfall. Another advice I'd give to young coaches is don't chase logos. And what I mean by that is too many coaches think, well, I'm coaching D4 now, that's great, but man, if I could be at that D1 school, man, it'd be so much different. It's not it's not that much different. You're coaching young men or young
Right.
women, um, who want to know that they matter, want to know that they care, and there are headaches at all levels of football, whether it's, like I said, Pop Warner High School, college. You're going to have different challenges before you. So find out what your why is, and then help those you're blessed to coach to find out their why. Once again, going back to find out what makes them tick.
Right. And like you were saying, I think that all goes back to just relationships and just, you know,
Yes.
truly caring about the person that you're working with, that you're coaching. And going back to what you were saying with never chasing logos, I believe it was at AFCA a couple of years ago, but Dabo Sweeney spoke and he was talking about just being planted where your feet are,
Yeah.
and never don't get caught up in the game of trying to focus on that next job. Like really pour into your kids at your own program, and that's great to hear coaches like yourself that are empowering young people to be the best versions of themselves. And as a recent athlete myself and a new person in the coaching industry and profession, I've found that it's so easy to understand to get caught up in those things that maybe not don't always matter, but it's important to know and always go back to like what are your like what is your why and what are your passions, and just
Yeah.
focusing on the culture of not only what's important to yourself, but what's important to the program and the people around you.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm not sure. I know you said you just recently got out of college, but I got married at 22. Are you single still, married?
Yeah, I'm still single.
Okay. Yeah, and I think for coaches that are single, man, if football is, I hate to say your life, because for all of us, it's going to come to an end at some point. We need to have our identity not just wrapped up in what we do as a profession. But that's a whole nother conversation. But if you are, for coaches that are single, if you want to get to the office 2 hours before practice and then stay 4 hours afterwards and do all that stuff, do that. But one of the things I really try to stress with all of our staff, and I try never to say my staff. I think too many coaches think they're God's gift to football, and without getting preachy to your audience, football is God's gift to me. It just blessed me in tremendous ways, and I want to return those blessings to others. But if you are married, and especially if you have children, the only one that's going to remember that you spent countless hours in that coach's office are your wife and kids, and they're not going to remember it in a great way. And I think when I say I've proven, I know I'm not the only one, but I feel like I am one of many who have proven that you can be successful as a football coach and make sure that your family comes first. So this was not very popular my first few years as head coach in New Hampshire with our staff, but we never have coaches meetings on Sundays ever, ever. Not an hour, not 2 hours. I'll hop on a phone call with any coach. I'll go over some scheme. I will text back and forth and watch some film, but you've got to have balance. And I think once again, uh, when you are not only responsible for yourself as a single coach, but you have decided to marry someone and start a family, make sure that you don't lose your wedding ring in the pursuit of chasing championship rings.
Right. No, and that's great advice too. And as somebody who's, still in my early 20s, over the next couple of years, that is something that, I probably want to get done. And I'm sure a lot of people that are just getting started, like, will eventually do, is get married and have
Yep,
families. So, definitely important to keep in the back of my mind.
absolutely.
So awesome, coach. Well, any last words of advice that you want to share with the audience today?
Gosh, it's such an open-ended question. I think we could go on forever. It's just no, I just never lose your passion for it. Once again, I think whatever gets you or I or any of us into coaching in the first place, um, never forget where you came from and what your why is to get into coaching. There's a young coach in our staff now. I won't mention his name, but hated high school football. Was bullied by teammates, bullied by coaches. He reached out to me on Twitter and about being interested in coaching. So set up a meeting with him and fell in love with him right away. His humility and his desire. And what I do with our interviews is years ago, I used to sit down, interview someone. I'd call you into my coach's office. We'd talk football for about an hour and a half or so, and I'd make a decision whether or not you were a good enough football coach. And then what I found was I hired a lot of football minds who are not aligned with what I'm looking for as human beings who want to connect with people. So what I do now when I call a coach in, I'll meet with them for about 30 minutes or so, talk no football at all. I just want to get to know them. Tell me about your playing experience. Tell me about your youth. Tell me about your family. Tell me about what you do for work, and kind of get a feel from there. And if I get a good sense, I invite them back for a second interview in the weight room. And what I do there is I don't, because every coach has the interview answers. When you say, hey, why do you want to coach? What do they all say? I want to make a difference. I want to give back.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
found out over the years that making a difference, giving back looks a lot different when the crap hits the fan. When you're in a game and you're losing, or your player throws an interception, or doesn't make the tackle, you see a different side of coaches sometimes. So if I like the first energy and vibe in the first interview, I say, hey, come into the weight room. I give them our schedule, and they're like, all right, what do you want me to do? I'm like, whatever you want. I'm going to be working out with the guys, coaching them up and helping them. You can train, you can just work out, you can just sit back and watch. And I've had coaches that kind of pass the first test, but when they come into the weight room, they will walk right towards that corner of the weight room where the studs are and spend the whole time there and yapping it up with them and joking around and having a great time, but literally walk past the kid that can barely bench 135 or can barely squat the bar.
Right.
Um, and then this young man I start to talk about had a real good vibe with him the first time we met. And then when he came to the weight room, and I don't mention what I'm looking for in the weight room. I don't tell them I'm looking for this stuff. And the first young man he went over to was one of our freshmen or sophomores who was struggling with a very, very light amount of weight on the bar. And I thought, that's the dude I want. Because you can teach someone drills, you can teach someone the X's and O's, you can teach them how we want to teach tackling and all that stuff. But as far as character, I think we can help model that and build that in our players and assistant coaches. But if you when you find someone that already has that character and that desire to serve, it's a lot different.
Definitely. And just talking with you on this conversation, it's really encouraging to hear, like, you have a very direct why, and it seems like from what you were talking about with the coaches on your staff, you want to surround yourselves with like-minded people, and I think that's really important too. So from
Absolutely.
doing these conversations, and this is actually episode number 64, I believe.
Nice.
So having all these conversations, it's important to know, and I've also learned just how, the importance of surrounding yourselves with the right people. And for the people out there watching, highly recommend, modeling, especially if you're a head coach, modeling your coaching after, at least trying to figure out who are the right people for your program.
Yeah, absolutely. And our staff, and I won't go long because I know we're going to wrap up soon, but this past season, our staff ranged from 20 years old to 77. One of
Wow.
the coaches on our staff was a local college coach here for about 8 years, and just he's one of the coaches that we talk about that has forgotten more football than we'll ever know. But it's amazing to see all the varied. I'm right there in the middle, kind of in my early 50s, which feels old when I say it, but mentally I don't feel like I still feel like I'm 18. Um, but yeah, surrounding yourself with like-minded people with varying backgrounds, and varying, strengths and all that stuff to grow together.
Definitely. Well, Coach, thank you very much for sharing today. I really appreciate you being on the podcast, and best of luck this off season in the weight room.
Appreciate it, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks.